So people have been asking me for a while to make a weapons building video for youth combat weapons, and I started to feel guilty and decided that I would try to do that, especially as people are starting to prepare for PennSIC and other events that have youth combat in them. The instructions on how to make the weapons are in the rules, and there are a couple of picture guides, but a lot of people really wanted a video so they could see step-by-step how to do things. So there are a couple of things that you're allowed to make weapons out of. You can make it out of Siloflex, PEX, and rattan, either shaved or unshaved. But if you use unshaved rattan, you have to cut the growth rings off, and you have to round the ends with a rasp. But I don't have any rattan today, so we're going to be making weapons out of PEX. I don't often use Siloflex. It's a little hard to find, and it's a little less structurally sound. It's great for Division 1 weapons, but I tend to use PEX. PEX can be bought at Home Depot or Lowe's, maybe other stores, hardware stores, but I have Home Depot and Lowe's right next to each other, so that's where I do all my shopping. We have two different sizes of PEX that we use. We have 3/4 inch PEX, which is this one, and we have 1 inch PEX, which is this one. I use 3/4 inch PEX for Division 1 weapons, smaller Division 2 weapons, and use them for javelins. The 1 inch PEX I use for larger Division 2 weapons and Division 3 weapons, although the larger weapons such as polearms and whatnot, I tend to suggest using rattan. So we're going to start with my Division 1 weapon. For the ends of the PEX, we don't want it to punch through the foam, so we ask you to cap the end. You can use strapping tape, you can use leather, but the easiest answer are these. These are CPVC caps, which is not the same as PVC. These are allowed. They're a kind of off-white color. You can find them in the hardware section. These are 3/4 inch caps, and they fit on the 3/4 inch PEX. And you just pop them right on there, and you're good to go. So there are two different ways that you can pad your weapons. There's the Q-tip method, and then there's the double layer method. Thrusting tips have to be 2.5 inches across. So you have to double layer when you want a thrusting tip on a weapon, or it's going to be too small. If you're just going with a non-thrusting weapon, which I never bother to do, then just 1 layer of foam is acceptable, depending on the foam you use. So Home Depot sells 1/2 inch wall foam. 1/2 inch wall foam is great because we require 1/2 inch of foam on the striking edge of a weapon. Lowe's sells 3/8 inch wall foam. You can see the difference. One is much thicker than the other. 3/8 inch foam I use when I am double layering weapons, because if you use 1/2 inch foam to double layer a weapon or a thrusting tip, you wind up with a 3 inch monstrosity, and it's obnoxious. Usually, if I was going to double layer a full weapon, I would actually get all of my foam from Lowe's, and it would all be 3/8 inch, so that the whole weapon wouldn't be bulky. I don't have it today, so I'm going to cheat with my 1/2 inch and my 3/8 inch. So there are different diameters of foam from Home Depot and Lowe's. Obviously, we have 3/8 inch interior diameter, and then we have 1 inch interior diameter. They are different sizes. It's a lot more obvious in person. So for the 3/8 inch weapon, I want to use, for the 3/4 inch PEX, we want to use 3/4 inch foam. You just slide it right in. And when you're sliding it on, you want to make sure to leave enough room for the kid's hand, and then some at the bottom for the butt of the weapon. So when it comes to measuring out the length of the weapon, like I said, I make all of my weapons with thrusting tips. I also don't use measuring tape. Measuring tape is obnoxious. I do have it. just in case. But one of the things that you'll find is Duck Brand tape is just shy of 2 inches. So instead of using measuring tape, I use duct tape. So you find the end of the weapon, you squeeze until it gets super squishy, and then you put your duct tape up against it as your measuring tool. You take a good pair of scissors or a razor knife or whatever you are comfortable cutting nicely with, and a little bit higher than the duct tape because it's just under 2 inches and you want to give some room for compression, you cut. And you have your base striking edge. Now for the thrusting tip, because it has to be 2.5 inches wide, or 2 inches off the end and 2.5 inches wide, that's when I take my black self-sealing foam. It's 3/8 inch, and all I do is measure out a 4-inch piece, 2 4-inch pieces. So you take 2 rolls of duct tape, which I have handy here. And I like a nice edge, so I'm looking for the nicer edge. And you measure out 2 4-inch pieces of the gray self-sealing foam. So that's 1 4-inch piece. And this is another 4-inch piece, just by dumb luck. I'm going to trim this one down just a scotch to make it pretty. Now, for the thrusting end, all you do is you take this gray self-sealing foam and you line it up with the top of the weapon. And then you take the other piece of self-sealing gray foam, and you see that gap right there? Now you have a bit of overlap here. You don't want a really big gap in here, so what you do is once you line it up and you get it all settled in properly, you just take your scissors and you trim down where they meet. And now the 2 pieces are flush, or mostly flush. If you didn't do it quite right and there's still a little more overlap, just fix it and trim down again. They have 2 pieces that meet mostly flush. Like I said, if you mess it up, just do it again. It's not a huge deal. The smaller the peck size, the more likely you are to need to trim down a little more, obviously, because it's smaller. And then once you have it just the way you want it, you pull the little sticky self-sealing stuff off. And you stick the 2 pieces together. So now you have 2.5 inches across. See, there's your 2 inches, there's the extra 1/2 inch, life is good. Now down on the butt end, you just need it to extend. Put it on, I'd say just put it on right over the cap and just past it. And it needs to extend about 1 inch past the end of the pecs. I tend to use my thumb because, well, my thumb is to the first joint, about 1 inch. You can be more specific with yours. So I have my thumb a little bit further. And you cut. And then with the gray foam you already have, the self-sealing stuff, you just match that size. so that you make this big enough where it doesn't go into anybody's helmet. Just trim it down right to the same size as this piece down on your butt end. And the same thing as with the other one. You fill in the gap, you overlap a little bit, trim it down. And once it fits nicely, and you trim it to size, you just take the sticky parts off. I personally like using the self-sealing foam for the top layer just because I don't have to worry about holding the two pieces together while I tape. They just go on nice and pretty. And you have your double layer down on the end. Now, we need to fill in these two holes here. Down here, it's not so big of a deal if it's perfectly snug, perfectly tight. So I just take an extra piece of foam that I have, and I roll it up, and I just put it into the hole. So now I have that hole filled, and I trim it down with my scissors. And we're good, nice and filled. On the top end, because this is our thrusting tip and it's going to receive the most abuse, we want to be a little more careful. So, we take our gray foam, or whichever foam you happen to have sitting around. I find the gray foam is just a little bit easier to work with in this case. And you want to measure this one to be just over 2 inches again. So I have my measure, I have my tape, and I cut. Now, I need to fill that hole. Now this is a smaller size weapon. It's a 3/4 as opposed to 1 inch. So I don't need a whole lot. Usually maybe about half the roll of the gray. And then I trim it. And you want to make sure it's nicely rolled. And I just slide it down in. And if it doesn't fit, I just cut a little more off. You want to make sure up in the top on the thrusting tip that it fits snugly. Because if it doesn't, it's going to start to compress oddly. And everything's going to get interesting. So it'll be a snug fit. You just got to work its way down there. If it still doesn't fit, no matter how nicely you try to slide it in, you just trim off just a little bit more until you make it fit. So what I'm doing now is fitting it down in there. It's okay if this gray piece here comes off. It's not a huge deal. You just slide it down, and you want to make sure it goes all the way in, because if it doesn't go all the way in, that means that your weapon slid up on you while you were building, and that you don't have your 2-inch thrusting point anymore. So you just work it in. If you have smaller fingers, like I do, you help until it's nice and snug in there. And then you can push the weapon back up to meet it. So I have a nice snug thrusting area. And then I put this layer back on because it came off while I was being violent. If it unsticks, it's not a big deal. So now you have your 2.5-inch thrusting tip. You have your butt. Now, what you are allowed to do to help with this being solid, I don't often do it, but I'm going to do it for this video, is you are allowed to use strapping tape, which is fiber tape. You can buy it at Staples in the mailing section. Theoretically, you can find it at Home Depot and Lowe's. I've had terrible luck with that. I just buy mine at Staples. See, Staples brand in there. And you take, and so about 2 inches in is your weapon. So you're allowed to take strapping tape and do a wrap once or twice of strapping tape to help give a little bit of support to that thrusting tip so it doesn't bend over. It doesn't need to be a tight wrap. You don't want to compress the foam in any way. firmly put it on there, and then you cut it off because you can't rip strapping tape. You have to use scissors. So now we are on to the taping. This is your basic Q-tip shape, 1/2 inch of foam here. We got 2.5 inches here for the thrusting tip. And now we start taping. So you have to use 2 contrasting colors for this. Contrast means they look different. So for this weapon, I'm going to use dark blue and yellow. Those contrast very nicely. So to start the taping process, what I personally do and suggest is you take your duct tape and you start it on the pecs, on the handle. So what this does is it gives you a better chance to hold the whole weapon onto your pecs so that you don't swing and have it go flying off into nowhere in the middle of your swing. The foam, that is. And then you're left holding a piece of pecs. Now, you never want to spiral wrap your duct tape. When you do that, you're more likely to compress your foam. And if you compress your foam, it's not squishy, it hits too hard, and it's not allowed. So you start down here on the base, you bring it all the way up, and you gently lay it down, and then you just flatten it out. If you need a little more because of the Q-tip, just pick it up again, and gently press, roll it over. Flatten it down, nice and pretty. And at the top, you want to make sure, again, you're not compressing the foam. So, you lay it across, and then bring it to the other side. Where you do the same, you bring it all the way down to the bottom without dropping your tape and messing it up. If you drop your tape and mess it up, it's not a huge deal unless you're really crazy about it being pretty. I'm not super fussed about this. This is going to be a loner weapon. You can try fix it a little bit. You don't need to scrap the whole piece of duct tape just because it gets messed up. You can just gently pull it, and it'll mostly flatten out. So again, down here, you want to press in just a little bit below the Q-tip. Bring it all the way down. Bring it all the way down. And back down here to the base. Flatten it out, make it pretty, unless you messed it up like I did, but that's okay. It's going to get messed up anyways when they hit people, so it's not a huge deal. So you need to do that all the way around the weapon until all the foam is covered. That usually takes about 3 wraps on a smaller kid's weapon. But what you want to pay attention to the most while you're putting this on is to make sure that you're covering up here. So you want to, actually going to roll my webcam down a little so you can see what I'm doing in my lap, because working from my lap is sometimes easier, is I start it up here and make sure it covers the gray foam up here. Then I bring it down, and back onto the base. Roll it across the top. Nice and gentle so it's not compressing anything. And back down to the other side where I'm making sure to overlap the foam, the duct tape, so that the foam isn't showing. So you're overlapping the duct tape so the foam doesn't show. It doesn't need to overlap a lot. It just needs to overlap enough where no foam is showing. And back down. So we still have one more piece of foam showing, so we do one more layer of duct tape. So I started over here. I make sure that I am overlapping all the gray foam that is left. And bring it down to the base, where I squeeze it on there. Back over the top, being careful not to compress your thrusting tip in any way, shape, or form. Because if you compress your thrusting tip, it's useless. And then all the way down. So you go around, smooth all the duct tape, make sure there are no pieces sticking out. And you have the base layer of the top done. Now you're going to do the same thing to the other end, exactly the same way. Down, up, over. Down, up, over. Whee! It doesn't matter how far you come onto the handle, that's going to be taken care of later, and it'll look much prettier when all is said and done. We've almost got it covered. One more layer should do it. And the weapon is now fully covered. So we have our base weapon. Now we need to add striking edges to it, which is where your contrasting tape comes in. So you don't want a 2-inch wide striking edge, just is silly. You can go out and you can buy the 1-inch duct tape that exists in like the Walmart crafting section and stuff. My big suggestion, by the way, when it comes to duct tape, never buy glitter tape. These are the 1-inch rolls of duct tape. This is glitter tape. Don't get it. Don't fall for the trap. It doesn't stick to itself. It doesn't stick to the weapon. Your kid's edges will be falling off mid-fight. Don't bother. You can get cool designs. You can get glow-in-the-dark. You can get whatever works for you. Just don't get glitter tape. So what I do is you take the tape and you rip it about halfway through. See, you're getting a nice 1-inch piece. And then on the blade, same deal as before, you start it down on the haft. And then nice and straight, bring it up to the top, lay it down, lay it flat. On the Q-tip, you might want to come back and flatten it out a little more. Up. Nice across, straight over, pretty. And back down to the other side on the haft. Now, because we've made a thrusting edge, we have to show everyone else that it's a thrusting tip. I mean, it's pretty obvious as a Q-tip, but we still require it to be very obvious, so you continue. And I personally bring my X all the way down to the bottom of the Q-tip. You don't have to. I just do. Because it's really nice and obvious that here I have a nice X for a thrusting tip. and then I bring it down to the other end of the Q-tip. You rip it off, and you lay it down. Now, the other thing I do to keep these pieces from pulling up is I start using the other half of my tape now, because I don't like having half a roll of tape sitting on the roll. I use my other half of the tape, and I do a band right below the Q-tip. What the band does below the Q-tip is A, helps hold that tape down, B, gently pulls in the duct tape that has been going on to the rest of the weapon. You do not squeeze this really hard. It is always, anytime you're going around the foam, nice and loose, firm. You don't want to squeeze, you don't want to squish the foam at all, but you are squishing the tape a little bit, so you have a nice little piece holding the Q-tip on, holding the tape on, and pulling in this tape that was sticking out over here. But you still have this handle. And again, I like to hold all my pieces down. And I still have this half roll of duct tape. So, I take my half roll of tape from the side that has the most on it, and this is the only time where you can crank down when you are taping something. Crank it as hard as you can, and start spiraling it down the handle. What this does is it holds all the tape in place, and it helps keep the foam from trying to run away. It's okay if this is messy. It's the grip. It helps them with grip to do that. And I just keep spiraling it until I have cleaned up my roll of duct tape, which I have now. And you have a nice Division I weapon. So I am going to stop the video for now. I'm going to make another video for a double layered weapon and with the 1-inch packs. Alright, thanks again.